Are you lost in the chaotic whirlwind of day-to-day busyness? Do you yearn for a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in your life? Welcome to Be You, Your Story, Your Purpose, the podcast dedicated to empowering women on their journey of self-discovery and finding their true purpose through their own story. I'm your host, Brenda Simmons. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. I'm so glad you're joining me today, and I really hope that you get some value out of what I'm going to talk about today. In my last podcast, I interviewed Saloni Sura, and we talked a little bit about EFT tapping. And so I wanted to do a podcast and really take a deeper dive into what EFT tapping is and how to actually do it. Now, I'm going to show you how to do this. And so if you want to see me do this, I'll do my best to describe it. But if you actually want to see it in process, I will put the link to my YouTube channel on there and you can check out the actual videos so that you can see it yourself. So a little bit into how I got into EFT tapping. My oldest daughter, I've interviewed her on the podcast. That was the week of this last Christmas. And so Jillian was just born with anxiety and a lot of fear. And for the first few years, when it first started out, I was like, well, that's kind of weird. What's going on with that? But her anxiety increased and increased and increased to the point where she had difficulties settling down at night or to take a nap. And she would start hyperventilating, and she would sometimes even throw herself into really like a shock type of a scenario where, she couldn't breathe. She was not getting enough oxygen. Her whole body would go tingly. And it was just because she was not able to settle herself down. And this one time in particular, I had some laundry on the laundry room floor, and she went in there, and I think what happened is she stepped on a little rock, but she said a spider bit her. And so there was absolutely no evidence. I mean, she's like 3, right? There's no evidence of any spider anywhere, but she cried nonstop for over 7 hours. And to the point where I just didn't even know what to do, and as new parents, you're thinking, well, what is the problem? What is wrong with my child? Like, how can I help my child? Like, what is it that I can do to help alleviate this fear? And back then I wasn't really well versed in anxiety, and we later learned that she's an empath. And so that added to all of these things. And so that night that she experienced this really traumatic event, I just was at my wit's end, and I just thought there has got to be something that I can do. And so I started researching, and back then it was a time of emails. And so you get a lot of information through email newsletters, and the internet was still fairly new, but I still would do a lot of research online as much as I could. And so I learned about this thing called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. And I was like, that's a weird name. Like, I don't understand what this is for. But I kept seeing it, and so, when you see things, you're like, okay, maybe I should check this out. And so I did. I looked into it, and I found that it was developed by this guy named Gary Craig back in 1995 is when he released it. So we're talking, this was around 2003, 2004 time period. And so it's still fairly new, right? It's a new thing. So just a little bit of history on Gary Craig. So he is actually an engineer, a Stanford engineer, and he was taking a class called Thought Field Therapy, taught by Dr. Roger Callahan. And in that class, he learned that touching your body on specific points could alter how we feel physically in other parts. So an example that from Dr. Roger Callahan was he was helping a woman who had severe phobia of water, and it manifested physically as a stomach ache. Like, she would feel sick to her stomach. And so he found that if he tapped under her eye, that point was then connected to her stomach, and she could immediately feel some release. So Gary Craig took what he learned from this thought field therapy and he developed emotional freedom technique. Now, the basis of this is not only the meridians, right, and these pressure points and how things are connected energetically within our bodies, but it also really has to do with that energy that we are made from energy, and that's something that comes from Albert Einstein. That's something that we've known for many, many years, that we are made of energy. So if you really think about this, there's two ways of thinking about energy in our bodies. So there's the Eastern medicine way of thinking. You know, they've got this electrical system called the meridian system. That's more Eastern medicine thought. And your energy is called your chi. Now, Western medicine looks a little bit different, but as far as how we describe it. So Western medicine, and I am totally glossing over this. I mean, you could go super deep into all of these. So this is just a very basic introduction. Western medicine is you've got a nervous system that is comprised of your sympathetic nervous system, which is your automatic flight, fight, and freeze response. So like when you're it's the response, the energetic response of when we are faced with danger, right? And then we've got the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's your relaxation responses. The energy in Western medicine is your emotions. Now, if you really think about it, your emotions are just an electrical vibration that runs through your body, right? So you know that there's a different vibrational point with each type of emotional, like when you're feeling down, like sad or depressed or feeling shame, like those are very, very low electrical vibrations. Whereas if you've got joy and happiness and freedom, those are very high electrical vibrations. Okay. So tapping then is just using that idea of how our bodies are electrically connected and finding those points, those acupuncture points to stimulate the nervous system. Now, the whole point of it is to get that energy system, that electrical system to flow. So what happens is we get blockages in our electrical and our energy system. And so they get all dammed up. And so that prevents the flow of energy and that creates problems that we see emotionally and physically and mentally, right? So here's the key though. These dams, a lot of them are caused by our subconscious mind. Now, our subconscious mind runs 85-90% of our whole show, right? And so those programs in our subconscious, they can be developed anytime in our life. A lot of them, though, are developed when we are young and we are impressionable, yet when we don't necessarily have the cognitive understanding to really process them. And so it's like our brain is totally open to all of these ideas, and even those ideas are wrong, and then pretty soon it shuts. And so they just get stuck inside. And so what served us well as a child may not serve us well as an adult. And so we've got to figure out, number one, what are those programs? And then number two, how do you clear those out so that you have a proper flow of your energetic system? So the goal of tapping them is to break down those dams, to clear out the blocks so that your energy can flow. Now, the way I learned it, so went back to 2003, 2004, I purchased his Gary Craig's, I wanted to call him Daniel Craig for a second. Like, that's not right. I purchased Gary Craig's system. So it was like a series of 12 different DVDs. And I watched every single one of them. And it was rough stuff, guys. It was not entertainment at all. It was just pure, this is how you do it. Example, 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 example. And these are different things that you can do. And so the way in which he taught me how to do it is a little bit differently than what I do now. But here's what I found. There is a lot of forgiveness in this whole system. Like there's not a specific way that you can do it. There's a lot of alterations and iterations that you can do, and it will work just as well. So if you're familiar with it, and I teach it a little bit differently, That's okay because there's a lot of different ways that you can do it and it will all get you to the same end. Now, the way I like to do it right now is there's two parts. So there's a setup and then there's the tapping part. So I'm going to go through what each of these looks like, and then I'll put it together and show you what it looks like all together. Okay. So for the setup, I so you're going to go to where your two collarbones meet, and there's a little V right there. Well, if you take just one side, you go to the tip of your collarbone and you go down about an inch or two and then over to your side an inch or two and just kind of start feeling around there. You're going to feel a sore spot. Like just there's so mine is if you're on the video, mine's right here. And so that you're going to identify an emotion or a thought or something that you're wanting to clear out, right? So let's say you are scared to fly. So I'm just pulling that out of my head. So you can say something like this. So you're going to say, even though and then you're insert what you're working on, and then you're finishing that statement, I deeply and completely accept myself, right? So you're acknowledging the problem and stating that even though you've got this problem, you still love yourself, right? There's still that self-compassion, right? And so you're going to rub that sore spot while you're saying your statement. So let's say, even though I am afraid to fly. I think that was the example I was using. Even though I am afraid to fly, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you do that 3 times, right? And so every time you're processing a different emotion, you're going to try to find that sore spot. What's interesting is as you go through this, you'll find that the sore spot gets lessened as you're clearing things out, and then as new things arise, then you'll find that again. So that's the setup. So you're acknowledging the issue and you're giving yourself some self-compassion. Now, the second part is the actual tapping. Now, I'm going to show you where each of the tapping points are. So I start on the top of my head, and you can use like 2 fingers, your first 2 fingers on both of your hands to do that. That's kind of what I use. And I don't, and you have to look at your body, like there's a line right down the middle of your body. And so there's mirrored on either side. So you can tap on both sides of your body, or you can tap on the right or the left. It doesn't matter. So you're going to get the same effect no matter what. Okay. So the first one is on top of your head, right in the center of on top of your head, right in the center. Okay. The second point is where your eyebrows meet. So there's a lot around your occipital bone, right? So the first one is right at that point where your eyebrows start, right? So you can kind of go up the bridge of your nose and right where it's like you're going up and down from your nose. So if you can see on the video, okay? So right at that point. So I just kind of find the inside edge of my eyebrow, okay? The third one is you're going to take the point of your eye on the outside of your eye, and you're just going to go out. So it's right that middle point between your eye and your hairline. So right in the center there. Then there's another one that's right on your occipital bone, right underneath the center of your eye. The next one is on your lip, between your nose and the top of your lip. So that space, your upper lip right there. Okay, right in the center. And then another one is on below your bottom lip, before your chin. So between your lip and your chin. So kind of right in the center of that space between your bottom lip and your chin. Then the next one is, remember how we found those 2 collarbone points? So that's where you want that. It's that collarbone point. Okay. And then the next one is underneath your armpit. You're right about where your bra line is. So you're going to take the middle of your chest out. And so if you were to extend both of your arms out and then kind of do, like, if you did a power pose, you'd put it on your hips. But if you went up to the center of your chest, that's where you want to do that one. Okay. Then there's the karate chop. So this is on the side of your hand. If you were to karate chop something, it is that point of your hand that would touch the whatever you're karate chopping. Okay. So it's right in the center of your hand between the bottom of your pinky and where your wrist starts. So right in the center there on the side. All right. So those are all of the points that I use. Now, there are other points as well, but those are the ones that I think that just work the best. And you'll see that most practitioners, those are the ones that they're going to use. So you're going to do the whole setup, identifying what the emotion or the problem is, giving yourself some self-compassion. And then while you're tapping on each of those points, and I just go start at the top of my head and work my way down to my hand. And then I do it over and over again. So while you're tapping, you're going to repeat that same statement that you did while doing the setup, right? So so this is what it looks like. So I find my sore spot. Even though I'm afraid to fly, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I'm afraid to fly, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I'm afraid to fly, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now I'm going to tap, okay? I'm afraid to fly. And I forgot to say, every time you're tapping, you're doing about I do like 7 to 9 times, basically about the amount of time that it takes me to say the phrase, right? So I'm afraid to fly. I'm afraid to fly. I'm afraid to fly, going on each point. I'm afraid to fly. On your lip, I'm afraid to fly. On your chin, I'm afraid to fly. Collarbone, I'm afraid to fly. Side, I'm afraid to fly. Karate chop, I'm afraid to fly. All right, so that's the process of it. Now, something to keep in mind. When you're putting this all together, it's really good to do a little bit of pre-work. So if you have got this statement, you're like, oh, I just can't get this thought out of my mind, or I'm just feeling sick to my stomach, or even like if you're feeling like I have a cold, right? So this helps with stuff like that too. So if you are, experiencing those things, you've got to identify what it is you're going to do. And then identify on a scale of 1 to 10, how true is this statement? So this is really important because it's your judge of how it's working. Okay. And so if you, let's say again that I'm afraid to fly, well, let's say it's a 10, right? So that's your base point. That's what you know to be true in that moment. Okay. You're going to do this. Now, when you go through that, you don't have to keep doing the setup every time before you do the tapping. You do the setup once for that particular emotion, and then you're going to repeat the tapping sequence on your body over and over and over and over again. Now, is there a specific time or a specific amount? That's really up to you and your body, right? And so what I do is then I stop periodically. So I'll go for like maybe 5-ish minutes or so, or maybe I'll do it like 20 times, and I'll go back and go, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how true is this statement now? And then you're just going with the first number that comes to you, right? So your gut reaction type thing. And so, okay, so I've been through this and I'm at like a 7 now. I was at a 10 and now I'm a 7. That's great. So you've got some work to do. So you want to keep doing that until you get down to like a 1 or 2. Okay. Now, here are some things to keep in mind. Watch the different thoughts that come to your mind as you're doing this. And so I have found that, you kind of can do it. And so that, how you get into a flow and you do something, and so you don't have to necessarily think about what you're doing all the time. Kind of like when you're driving and you get to where you're going, you're like, oh, I don't even remember how I got there. And so that's kind of what we're looking for. So you're doing it, right? But you're also aware of other things that are going on in your brain. Okay. And so that's what I'm talking about. Watch out for the different thoughts that come to your mind. Now, sometimes the thoughts that come to you will be negative. And so pay attention to that, because those are things that you're going to need to tap on as well. And so sometimes I'll be tapping and I'll go, well, that's really interesting that, I'm tapping for this, but I'm finding that this thought keeps coming up. And so I will actually pause tapping on the current thing and redo my setup on this new thing that has come up, because this is your subconscious processing things, right? And so you want to get basically what it's saying is, here's another dam. And before you break down the dam you're working on, you've got to break down this other dam, right? And so that's why I will stop. I will work on the new thing that comes up, clear that out, and then go back to what I was doing before. Now, other times you might have some different things come up. Like I've been tapping before and and I'll be working on maybe a thought that comes in my mind. And then I'll start thinking, well, why do I think that? What is that really true? I don't That's a silly thing to think. What else could I say instead? And so my brain starts processing these. As that dam breaks, you are going to feel that flow of different ideas, healthy ideas that are really able to propel you forward. Okay. And so what's really cool about those is then you can take those and you can actually tap those positive things. Once you've cleared out that dam, then you want to reinforce that dam with something positive. All right. So you don't need to do the setup on the positive things. You just tap those in. So rather than working on, and it seems counterintuitive, like why would I be telling myself something over and over again, something negative? Like we're told to not do that, right? But it truly does work when you concentrate on those things that are just ingrained in you and that you are struggling with, then it just works. I don't even know how to explain it, but literally that dam is being opened and you are allowing that electrical flow to move on. Now, if you now I something that I really like to do is to walk while I'm tapping. And the reason why I like this is I find that it works a little bit better for me. And I found that well, I was doing some research one day on oh, what is it? It's not EFT. It's, oh shoot, what's it called? Edit this. So I was doing some research one day on EMDR, and the gal who was doing EMDR, who developed it, she found that there was something about walking and moving, when you walk, you put one side forward and then another side, and there's something about going alternating on either side of you that is cognitively healing and emotionally healing, right? And um, so that was kind of where she started out doing the EMDR therapy. And if you've ever done EMDR therapy, that's really what it is. Now you're holding paddles or you're looking at light that is switching from one side of your body to the other, either by vibration or light. And so I was thinking, well, and I've experienced EMDR therapy many times, and I am a huge, huge fan and proponent of it. But I thought, well, I wonder what would happen if I combined walking with the tapping, having that motion, even if it's just my legs, while my arms are doing the tapping, to, doing that opposite side of my body kind of movement with the tapping, if that would work better. And for me, I feel like it accelerates how much, you know, the effectiveness of that dam breaking down. And so I don't have to do it as long. And oddly enough, my thoughts are clearer. When that dam does break, I just feel like it just flows a little bit better. So that is how you do EFT tapping. It is a very basic explanation. There are many, many videos, many courses that you can take to learn more about it, to get certified. But just to circle back to my daughter, here is what I found with her. She would be to the point, or she'd just be crying. She'd be hyperventilating. Like she could not get a deep breath. She would be shaking. Like I said before, sometimes her fingers and her toes would be tingly because she wasn't getting the oxygen that she needed. And so I would do this tapping on her, and I'm not kidding, within 5-10 minutes, she would be settled down enough and she could go to sleep. And they were, every single time it was really good for her too, because even as a small child, she was able to identify, well, this is what I'm feeling and this is why. And I said, okay, well, let's work on that, and she was able to see that it was an effective way to help her to settle down. And so having seen that in a child so young, so very quickly, like it became my number one tool for helping my kids. And it was interesting because back then, it was still fairly new. And I even had friends who would be like, you are nuts. Like what you're doing is so crazy. And yet, years later, one friend in particular came back to me and said she became a therapist. She goes, I use tapping all the time in my therapy. And I thought you were totally crazy for doing this so long ago. But it works. It totally works. And so I encourage you to try it out and to just see what it can do. One of the things that Gary Craig says often is that EFT works on everything. If you've got a phobia, if you've got, an illness, if you've got emotional turmoil, it just try it on everything because there's something about that energetic flow that is really, really important. And in fact, he even has some he calls them new beliefs. And so I'll put a link to his website. You can look at that. But he says, really, doctors don't know what caused disease. They don't. And he says, then it's like, what is that actual triggering event, right? So that's what he's saying. Another belief he says is that negative emotions cause diseases. The disease is actually a symptom of the cause of the negative emotions. And then number 3 is EFT works for everything. And so if you've got something wrong with your body, wrong with your mind, wrong with whatever you're looking at, your emotions, whatever, give tapping a try. There's so many resources online. There are whole businesses dedicated to tapping. And so I encourage you to find them and to do your own trial and error on this to see if it will work for you. And I hope that helps you. I hope you have found value in this podcast. Please please share it. And please follow me. It really helps me with my algorithms and getting my message out to the world. And if you know of anybody who you find that this could be helpful for, please share it. That is just the biggest compliment to me. And I hope that this little tool, this habit or life hack can help you in what you're dealing with today and help you to find and live your purpose. And just remember that your purpose is in your story. And I will see you next time. Bye.
Celebrate your dreams, let them take flight, for you are a star, shining bright in every step you take. Let your